Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Anaheim Ducks 2021 Draft Day coverage presented by Honda. Along with Guy Hebert and Steve Carroll, I'm John Ahlers. Thanks for joining us. Already a lot happening, and it started early today. Backing up the pick of Mason McTavish, taken in the first round yesterday. The Ducks in the second round early this morning. For those of you who slept in and probably didn't catch it, Olen Zellweger, a defenseman out of Everett of the Western League, taken with their second round selection. In the third round, the Ducks made a trade and moved into the lower portion of the third round after their original third round selection, which was Sasha Pastachov, taken out of the U.S. National Development Program. He's a right winger. He was taken 66th overall. They made a trade with Montreal and ended up with the 76th pick in the draft. So a second third round pick. They took Tyson Hines, a left shot defenseman out of Rimouski in the Quebec League, and just moments ago in the fourth round, Joshua Lapina, a centerman from the University of Massachusetts, the national champions, taken in the fourth round by the Ducks. So guys, we look at these picks, and Guy, I'll start with you. Not a lot of surprises because another big centerman, Lapina, is 6'2". He's a right-hand shot. I didn't mention that, to go with McTavish, a 6'1" centerman taken yesterday in the first round.
Yeah, Johnny, really no surprise. You know, if you look at what the Ducks' needs are long-term organizationally, it's certainly down the middle at center. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, and of course, you can never have too many defensemen. So the Ducks in this draft, I think, are accomplishing what they wanted to do, adding some good size, but also a lot of skill.
And Steve, we see them add a pick in the third round. So now in total, 5 picks for Anaheim taken in the first 98 picks in this draft. Coming into this draft, we weren't sure what to expect because the scouts, as a rule, usually see these players play more than they did this year. So two schools of thought here. Maybe you want more picks because you're not as sure as you normally are, or maybe you don't want as many picks because you're not as sure as you normally are.
You know, I've talked to a few scouts, Johnny and Guy, before this started, and I'm thinking there were a lot of gut selections from the gut, not knowing, not being able to see certain players all the time, certainly on video, but I don't think it's the same as guys being there in person. So some of these are just maybe guesses, a hunch that, hey, this is going to turn out to be pretty good. But what impresses me is I thought that there was a need for defensemen in the system, more depth. Forwards, we've got a couple of good center ice prospects, a right winger, 2 defensemen, different sizes, defensemen, some that are better maybe offensively than defensively, vice versa. So I think they've done a nice job through these rounds, and I'm kind of excited to see these guys perform someday in a Ducks jersey.
Well, we know from talking to Bob Murray over the years, the old NHL defenseman with over 1,000 games in this league, that you can never have enough defensemen. We were talking about a Guy a moment ago. You usually play in front of 10 or 12 over the course of an entire National Hockey League season. Most teams will use that many. These names aren't going to make a lot of headlines, though, as we move forward. What did make headlines yesterday, though, outside of the first-round draft picks, were some of the trades we saw. And there were some blockbusters early and even during the draft yesterday. A couple that stood out. I know one you want to talk about, Keith.
A really intriguing trade to me was the Arizona Coyotes. There's been a lot of talk about Oliver Ekman-Larsson over the years of being dealt, and he finally was dealt, and this time to the Vancouver Canucks. And the Coyotes traded Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland, who we know with a couple battles with John Gibson over the years, kind of a real pest. He'll fit well in Vancouver. For Louis Eriksson, Jay Beagle, Antoine Roussel, who is yet another pest, as we all know. And a 2021 first-round pick, the 9th overall, 2022 second-round pick, and a 7th-round pick. So there's a lot of players exchanging hands, a lot of moving parts, a lot of players to be named later type in the draft. But I think both teams are going to certainly benefit from this trade. I think Ekman-Larsson really needs kind of that reinvigoration of a new team, a new system, a new coaching staff to get the best out of them.
Yeah, and what we see here is Vancouver, two teams doing different things. Vancouver going for it as they get Ekman-Larsson, a player they've been pursuing for over a year. And Arizona, where they're concerned, somewhat starting over again. We saw him take on Andrew Ladd's contract from the Islanders earlier in the week. The Louis Eriksson contract, another one where a lot of people are speculating they're taking on a contract just to get to that salary cap floor. Right. Yeah. That was a big trade yesterday, but the biggest, Steve, was the movement of Seth Jones. He leaves Columbus and goes to the Chicago Blackhawks. I know you were taken by that one.
Yeah. Seth Jones, a first-round pick, and a 6th-round pick to Chicago for another young player, Adam Boquist. A first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a first-round pick. It's kind of confusing. I hope they know which years all these things occur in, but I believe that Seth Jones is a top 5 NHL defenseman. He adds so much to a hockey club, offensively, defensively, special teams. I think he's a big addition for any team that got him, and I think he's the key guy in this. I think it was time for a move out of Columbus, and I think he's going to be a big benefit to Chicago. And then what happens to Adam Boqvist? Well, he might get a better opportunity there playing a lot of ice time.
Oh, we certainly know that Seth Jones thought it was time to get out of Columbus. He made his feelings felt where that's concerned. So let's go beyond today. After the festivities of day 2 of the draft are concluded and the draft is in our rearview mirror, everybody looks ahead to Wednesday of this coming week when unrestricted free agency will begin. We spoke with Bob Murray, the Ducks general manager, yesterday, and he told us that he wasn't sure that the environment, at least right now, the way things looked like it would be a talent-rich environment where the Ducks were concerned. So if they were going to make some changes, perhaps look more to the hockey trade side of things. But where free agency is concerned, Steve, I'm going to go back to you again first. There's restricted free agency as well, and the Ducks, they have a little house cleaning to deal with there as well.
Yeah, and fortunately, most of the guys are young guys, and I think they'll get these deals done. Max Comtois, Max Jones, Isaac Lundestrom, Josh Mahura, Sam Steele. You would think that they would be able to sign all of those guys, and that's good because these are some of the young players that they're counting on for the future. And I just think you have to have them, and based on what we saw, especially as the season progressed here lately, I thought there was an improvement in a lot of these particular guys. Isaac Lundestrom for one. Max Comtois ends up being your top point producer and scored a couple of goals. So I think this is a good thing to get them signed and know that they're going to be around for a long time.
And Guy, I think the organization sent the message about the young players with the protected list that they went with for the expansion draft. There was a different way they could have gone. Again, Bob Murray discussed it with us yesterday. Had they gone 4 defensemen and 4 forwards, the concern there was they would have exposed some of those young forwards that Steve just mentioned. I think the message sent was, we're not ready to give up on our young forward prospects just yet.
Yeah, well, thing that gets lost, Johnny, is we all know it's difficult to play at the NHL level, and there's the learning curve, and you want to see these kids be very productive offensively early on, and it takes sometimes the speed and the physicality of this league takes a toll on some of the guys. So I think that you've seen some of the early stages of these guys making big strides, Max Comtois being one of them, Lundestrom another. But listen, I'm a big fan of Sam Steele. I think he's got a lot in the tank to show. He's got great speed. I think he was just kind of getting into his stride at the end of last season. So as a fan of the Ducks, I'm really happy to see that these guys are still in the fold. I'm sure they all will be signed, and they'll become major contributors over the next few years. And it's great to have that internal competition with guys that are the same age.
And think about this. We got a McTavish kid we just drafted. Who's to say that he doesn't surprise people and make the hockey club next year? So you have another young addition to the group that we just talked about.
Yeah, it's a great point. And as we continue to watch the future over our shoulder here on the floor, the draft floor, from the war room, if you will, for the Ducks, we continue to see prospects come into the organization. And these are balls of clay, if you will, but not perfectly formed balls of clay just yet. And I think the development process at times gets overlooked a little bit. These teams draft these players and they're talented players and they go on to NHL careers. It's not that simple. They go on to NHL careers because of the development process, which now belongs to the individual NHL teams. And where the Ducks are concerned, guys, some changes made this offseason. We got a couple of new assistant coaches coming in with the big club with the Ducks, and Jeff Ward and Mike Stothers, and a new head coach at the American League level. You can speak to it on a personal basis, Guy. How important are these guys to that development process?
Well, I think you're referring to me as a ball of clay at one time.
At one time.
At one time, way back.
But now perfectly formed.
Yes, well, thank you. But it's all about being able to develop these prospects. You see a lot of potential in these kids. You draft them on their potential and what trajectory they might be able to take. And with the right coaching, whether it's junior, U.S. Nationals, Canadian National, college, there's a lot of opportunity for these kids who are 17 and 18 over the next couple of years. But once they get here, it's a different thing because now they're molded by the coaching staff that they want to have, whether it's San Diego or Anaheim. And specifically, I'll talk about Newell Brown, a former coach of mine. Newell is back here in Anaheim as a coach.
His third tour of duty?
And he is, and I love playing for Newell. He's one of those guys that's infectious. His energy, his positivity. He's the good cop in the room all times, and he's great with the special teams play. So I think Newell will have a big big factor in special teams this year for the big club, but I think that he'll be one of those guys who's always nurturing the young players.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing a good Spartan, by the way, too.
I was
Newell
gonna let you
Brown
go.
returns for his third tour of duty behind the Ducks bench. Ducks fans will remember he was one of the assistant coaches on the '07 Stanley Cup championship team. The other new faces, though, that we mentioned as well, I know, Steve, you wanted to talk about them.
Yeah, all very qualified, no doubt about that. If you look at Jeff Ward, Mike Stothers, Joe Bouchard going down to coach the San Diego team, which of course, if you don't know, the Ducks' top affiliate. These guys have experience from the lowest levels of hockey, college, junior, up through the East Coast League, American League, and guys like Ward and Stothers have been assistant coaches with a couple of NHL teams. Bouchard played for 8 teams. He was a general manager of a junior club for 7 years. So what I'm saying is these guys are expert people in players, new players coming in, maybe just drafted, development up until they hopefully get a chance in the American League up to the NHL. These guys have been there. They know what it takes. They bring knowledge, experience, and the other thing that I know about them, they're all good communicators. And it's very important, I think, for coaches to be able to communicate, especially with young players, get their belief that what you're telling them is the right way to go. And I think that breeds success.
We all look forward to you joining us here at Honda Center, the home opener on the 14th of October, when the Winnipeg Jets will be here as we begin the 21-22 National Hockey League season. So with more on the events of the weekend here at the Ducks 2021 draft floor, we now hear from Ducks Assistant General Manager Martin Madden and Director of Player Development Todd Marchand. Ducks Assistant General Manager Martin Madden, the events of the weekend now complete. Martin, obviously you have to, as a staff, look back. What kind of a weekend was it for the Anaheim Ducks?
I think it was a very successful weekend. Really excited and happy with the group of players that we were able to draft.
So much attention goes to Mason McTavish, taken 3rd overall. We had the opportunity to watch the draft table. Looked like you guys knew exactly who you wanted to pick. Then it looked like maybe a phone call came in that could have changed things. What's it like in those moments when you are literally on the clock?
Yeah, I mean, our job is to maximize the pick. So leading up to the draft the last 2 days, we were trying to ascertain value. How far down could we get to get a player that we were really excited about, and how much we were willing to accept to take the risk that we might not get the one that we absolutely wanted. And a team called at the very end trying to get up, but they were not willing to pay what we wanted for that privilege. So we were happy to go ahead and make our selection.
In talking with you, obviously, earlier before the draft, you mentioned to me, centermen bring more versatility. Yeah. You look back now at what you guys were able to achieve during this draft. I noticed a couple pure centermen were taken, a couple of other wingers. Obviously, depth on defense is always something I think you look to try to build. Are you happy with what you achieved in this draft as opposed to what you were looking to get done heading into it?
Yeah, I think we achieved our objectives this weekend. I told you we wanted to have a balanced draft, and we achieved that. We set the tone with a player, I think, that fits what we need in so many different ways, and will be able to lead this group and many other upcoming groups, I believe.
So in the first round, it's Mason McTavish, which, as we mentioned, gets all the headlines. Olin Zellweger goes early on Saturday in round 2. And most of the focus, rightfully so, usually goes at the players taken higher in the draft. Players from the 3rd round on, that for you, obviously, I know you're excited about them all, but a player that maybe would stand out that we wouldn't normally maybe put our focus on, that you would like to talk about, or perhaps that you're very excited about?
We're excited about all the players. Really, we are.
That's a great answer, by the way.
But Olin Zellweger has the potential to be a first power play defenseman in this league. He's a kid who helps teams play fast. He's really good at retrieving the puck and going north-south. and he's a different type of defenseman that we have in the system. We're excited about the crop of prospects that we have on the back end, but he brings a different element to that group, so we're really excited about him as well.
Now this was a different draft, and no one likes to have, as I like to say, no one likes to have their cheese moved. And as scouts, you guys are used to seeing these players a lot more than you saw this year because of the pandemic. Was it a difficult draft because things were different, or was it maybe a draft where you wanted to have more picks because it was so different?
No, I think in terms of the strategy surrounding the draft, I don't think we changed our game plan that much from previous years. I would say that the lapse between the time that you last see the players and the draft was a little longer this year, and with fewer live viewings, I would say that personally, and I think we talked about it as a staff, that memory is not quite as vivid when you haven't seen the player live, when you've watched him probably 3-4 times more on video than you usually would. So the viewings are there, but then the season ends and you start doing more video, and I guess we had to do a lot more video just to keep it fresh, and in the end it worked well for us.
Did it create quite a challenge though, the fact that I guess maybe just from a comfort level, from what you're accustomed to, did it create more of a challenge?
It was a challenge until we finally learned that we were going to be able to see many of these top-end kids at the U18s in Dallas. Mm-hmm. That competition really was helpful because now you're not just relying on video viewings, but you get a live look at the top prospects over a 10-day period. You get to see them 6-7 times, and that was very helpful.
Finally, we get to watch these life-changing moments through video. These players have family gatherings. We've seen them react to the selection. What does it feel like for you to be able to give that moment to these young men? You've watched them. You've known that they were prospects in your mind.
Yep.
But this is a dream coming true for every player drafted today. What does it feel like to give them that moment?
Yeah, I'll use the same word. It's a privilege, and at the same time, more and more of these kids are very mature as athletes and very self-aware, and they know that this is just the beginning of the journey. They're excited for the day. They're excited to finally put a sweater, a jersey, a hat, and be associated with a team, especially if it's the Ducks. But in the end, the work starts tomorrow, and they have a lot of competition ahead. They have many challenges that they'll face, and we'll help them along the way.
Joined by Ducks Director of Player Personnel, Todd Marchant. And Todd, obviously all the focus on the draft and the players that are being selected. Fans, I think, oftentimes think, well, we got a great prospect. He's going to play in the National Hockey League. But there's a little more to that. There's the development process of getting them from a prospect to be an NHL player. How soon does that development process begin?
Well, it started today with the draft. I mean, it starts with communication. It starts with, talking to the players about what they need to work on, and it evolves. And as they go through the process, certain things they'll get quicker than others. Some kids develop quicker physically than others. Some develop mentally quicker than others. And no development is the same. Everyone is a little bit different. So we go at that pace. Whatever pace that they're willing to go or they are at, then we go at that pace. And some kids are in college. They'll be in college for 3-4 years. Some are in junior and they'll be joining us next year. So really no two situations are the same.
And that leads me directly to my next inquiry. We hear a player comes from this team in the OHL, or he's going to play in college hockey at this location. How involved is the NHL team allowed to be in that development process while they're playing in the OHL, Western League, or in the NCAA, for example?
Yeah, we get a little bit more leniency in the junior hockey teams. We're allowed to be around them a little bit more. Now, that being said, certain colleges, NCAA teams want you around their players more. But there are certain rules that you have to follow. And then you get the European players that a lot of them might be playing pro, so they have their own teams of what they do. So you take every situation with what it is, and you communicate with not only the player but their coaching staff to make sure that we're on the same page with what they're saying to them as well.
Now, in years past, the draft would typically happen in late June, and usually within 10 days, a development camp would happen for NHL teams. We'd see them at Anaheim Ice back in the day here. These last two drafts have been very different. I don't have to tell you that. Is there a development camp in the future for the Ducks, or is that something that is down the line for the years to come?
Yeah, the NHL kind of steers us in the direction of what you're allowed to do for development camps or not. And this year they said that you could have it through the month of August or up until rookie camp. We decided as a staff that we were going to push it back towards closer to rookie camp so that we could limit the amount of travel that our players were going to have to do. Unfortunately, you do leave some players out because your NCAA players are going to be the ones that are going to be in school, and you don't want to pull them out of school, or you can't really pull them out of school to bring them to a development camp. So some players we won't see this year, and other players that we will. But the players that we won't, we make sure that we're out there and giving them some extra attention during the season.
In terms of those development camps, we know how invaluable they can be to the organization. For the first time, you're seeing the prospects in front of you and in that controlled environment. How valuable can they be to the player? I mean, it's your first exposure to your new NHL organization and to the personnel and the people you're going to be dealing with.
I think it's more valuable to obviously to the player. I mean, them coming out, getting to know us a little bit more, getting to see the facilities that we have, getting to know our staff so that when they walk in the door the second time, they know our medical trainers, they know our equipment trainers, they know our hockey ops staff. You know, they've met Bob Murray before, they've met our coaches. So I think that that part is definitely more valuable for the players, but it's also very valuable for us as well to just see how they're progressing. If some of our staff haven't seen a player that's maybe a college kid, all of a sudden they get to see him for 4 or 5 days here while they're training with us. So they get some familiarity with the player and what they do well and what they need to work on.
You mentioned the communication process. We're going to use our imagination here. We're really going to use our imagination. We're going to imagine I just got drafted. Beyond the phone call where you tell me that you've selected me when is the next phone call, and how does that communication go between the organization and the player?
We're in constant contact with players. I mean, you know, as soon as the players are drafted, you know, Bob Murray talks to them, Martin Madden, any of our other scouts that were involved in the process of drafting the player, and then usually I'm the last one to talk to them. And then I usually follow up in a week or so and just say how we have a little bit more time to talk about them as a player, where they grew up, what's their family situation, what is it like, what's their relationship with their coach, who is their advisor, their agent, all these different things that go into me or us learning about them as a person, because that is more as important to knowing them as a player. So that process starts, will be starting next week, and it continues on. And with technology today, there's no excuse to not be able to get in touch. And all of a sudden, during the season, someone has a real good game, you fire them off a text, say, hey, great job last night, congrats on the win, and keep it up. And I know that means a lot to those players because their NHL team that drafted them is keeping tabs on them.
And I don't know if you can answer this one. Finally, between development coaches, skills coaches, assistant coaches, and team personnel, between that draft day and the day that you come to a camp with a real chance to be an NHL player, how many different coaches and personnel from the organization do you think you come in contact with before you have that real chance to be an NHL player?
Lots. I don't have an exact.
As I said, I didn't know if you could really answer that.
I don't have an exact number, but it's a lot, and your staffs are always changing. And I just know that Francois Beauchemin, player that I obviously played with and played here, he helps us or works with us in player development, and he tells me a story about when he was drafted by Montreal, and their player development guy came down to a game, and when he was in junior, to see him play, and what it meant to him to see that NHL team there watching him and talking to him after the game. And for me, that's the value of a player development staff, because I know what it meant to him, and I know what it means to our players, that when they know that we're going out to see them play, that for me is all the value in the world. So that's why we do it, and that's why we continue to do it.
The commitment and the process that is probably the most overlooked, I think, in the development of players from the junior level to when they're drafted to when they become NHL players. There's so much that goes into it. The Director of Player Personnel for the Anaheim Ducks, Todd Marchand, joining us. Todd, thanks so much.
Thanks, Johnny.